Dozens of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, which had been supplied by Russia over the years, were declared unnecessary and redundant by Syria's new government following the collapse of Bashar al Assad's regime. Photographs shared by Wilat TV revealed a large collection of former Syrian Arab Army armored vehicles, all gathered together in open fields in Idlib province, highlighting the scale of unused military hardware now left behind. The field in Idlib has effectively been transformed into an open-air graveyard, containing over 100 Soviet-made tanks and infantry fighting vehicles that are now abandoned and left to deteriorate. The fall of Bashar al-Assad not only marked the end of his rule but also left Russia's fleet of T-62M tanks stranded, turning them into powerful symbols of a military gamble that ultimately failed. Over 100 Soviet-era T-62 tanks, BMP-1S infantry fighting vehicles, and other armored hardware were clearly seen parked at the Idlib site, sitting idle and no longer deployed in active operations. Russia had repeatedly announced and publicized the delivery of these tanks and armored vehicles to Syria over the past decade, portraying them as crucial reinforcements for Assad's forces. In 2017, Syria received a batch of T-62M tanks that had been pulled from storage in the Russian army and withdrawn from active service, marking one of Moscow's efforts to bolster the Syrian military arsenal. These T-62M tanks, however, were upgraded and modernized specifically for the use of the Syrian National Army, with modifications intended to enhance their effectiveness in ongoing conflicts. The T-62M upgrades included additional turret armor and reinforced hull protection, providing extra defensive capabilities against both anti-tank weapons and artillery fire. The Russian tanks and BMP-1S vehicles were shipped by sea to the Syrian port of Tartus, where Russia maintains a strategic naval base that serves as a hub for its military operations in the region. These armored vehicles were originally sent to Syria to replace heavy losses suffered by the Syrian Arab Army during the civil war, aiming to restore combat strength to Assad's forces. Throughout the years of the Syrian civil war, these tanks and armored vehicles were widely deployed in various combat operations, often taking part in frontline battles across the country. Despite the large influx of Russian military hardware, Assad's regime ultimately collapsed on December 8, 2024, signaling the end of his control over the country and rendering much of the equipment useless. Bashar al-Assad reportedly fled to Russia, where he was granted political asylum, leaving behind weapons, tanks, and other military equipment that was subsequently seized by Syria's new authorities. Much of the abandoned military hardware left on government bases eventually passed into the hands of the new Syrian government, who began consolidating and assessing the value of the equipment. Footage from the storage site in Idlib has been circulated widely on social media platforms, giving the public a rare glimpse of the scale of abandoned Russian-supplied tanks and armored vehicles. Since last year, Syria's new government has moved a large portion of the Soviet-era military hardware to a single consolidated site, concentrating the equipment in one location for easier management or potential repurposing. It remains unclear at this point whether the Russian-supplied tanks will ultimately be scrapped, sold to other countries, or refurbished and returned to active military service under the new Syrian authorities. Meanwhile, Turkey has stepped in to supply the new Syrian government with Cobra and Cadillac Gauge Commando armored vehicles, providing a different kind of support compared to Russia's legacy systems. These Turkish-supplied vehicles are intended to enhance the mobility and protection of the new Syrian forces, giving them modern capabilities to patrol and secure areas under their control more effectively.